Hey everyone, today we're talking about a major event in ancient history, the Siege of Jerusalem in 70 CE. This was a huge moment in the First Jewish-Roman War, and it happened when Rome was changing leaders. Emperor Nero had just died, and the new rulers wanted to end the rebellion in Judea as quickly as possible. The trouble had been building for a while. People in Judea were angry about high taxes and religious issues under Emperor Nero. Things got worse when Gaius Florus, a Roman governor, took money from the Second Temple in Jerusalem, claiming it was for Rome. That pushed the people over the edge, and soon protests turned into full-blown rebellion. This started what we now call the First Jewish-Roman War. Rome sent General Vespasian and his son Titus to deal with the situation. They captured several key cities around Jerusalem, cutting off support to the main fortress. But then Emperor Nero died, and chaos broke out in Rome. Eventually, Vespasian became emperor with the help of his army, and he returned to Rome. He left Titus in charge of the fight in Judea. On April 14, 70 CE, just a few days before Passover, Titus and his army arrived at Jerusalem. This was terrible timing for the people inside the city, because thousands of visitors had arrived for the festival, making the city extremely crowded. Jerusalem was a tough place to attack. The city was surrounded by steep valleys, and its walls were strong. The richer citizens lived in the upper city on the west side, while the Temple Mount was on the east. North of the temple was the fortress of Antonia, adding even more protection. By this point, the people inside Jerusalem had also built an extra third wall to make things even harder for the Romans. As if things weren't bad enough, the rebels inside the city were divided into rival groups that kept fighting each other. Instead of working together, they wasted supplies and weakened their chances of defending the city. The two main leaders were Simon bar Gioras, who controlled the upper city and Herod's palace, and John of Gischalla, who held the Temple Mount. Their fighting only made things worse as the Romans got closer. When Titus and his army arrived, they set up camp on the Mount of Olives east of the city. But before they could get organized, Titus and some scouts rode out to check the area. The rebels attacked them, catching the Romans by surprise. Titus barely escaped with his life, and several Roman soldiers were killed. After that, Titus ordered his men to clear the land so they could see better and move their equipment more easily. To trap the city from all sides, Titus set up two more camps northwest of Jerusalem. The Romans then started building ramps to climb the outermost third wall. The defenders fought back hard, firing missiles at the builders, but the Romans used their own artillery to protect their workers. In just 15 days, the Romans broke through the outer wall. The Jews fell back behind the second wall, but the Romans kept pushing and smashed through that one in only 4 days. The situation was getting worse for the people inside. And after breaking through Jerusalem's second wall, the Romans tried to push in, but the path was so narrow that only a few soldiers could go through at once. The rebels used this to their advantage, attacking the Romans and forcing them to retreat. This was a big setback for Titus and his army. To turn things around, Titus ordered his soldiers to build a huge wall all around the city. This wall kept anyone from sneaking food into Jerusalem, making things even harder for the defenders. Once the Romans were ready, they attacked the second wall again and broke through. This time they destroyed most of it except for the towers. The rebels retreated to their last line of defense, the inner wall. This part of the city included the strong fortress of Antonia, a tough spot for the Romans to take over. Titus ordered his soldiers to build ramps, battering rams, and siege towers to attack the fortress walls. After 17 days, everything was ready. But the rebels had a clever trick. They dug a tunnel under the ramp, filled it with fuel, and set it on fire. The ramp collapsed, and much of the Roman siege equipment was destroyed. The defenders felt victorious, for a little while. Sadly for the rebels, the fire also weakened their own fortress walls. The Romans attacked again the next day, and this time, the walls quickly crumbled. The Romans finally broke through and took over the Temple Mount. The fighting didn't stop there. At the temple, there were 4 major battles. In the first one, some Roman soldiers attacked without orders, thinking they could win easily. the rebels fought back and managed to hold the temple. Later, Titus ordered the fortress to be destroyed. Another attack happened during the night, but neither side could claim victory, and both suffered heavy losses. The rebels then played a trick on the Romans. They pretended to retreat, drawing the Romans onto the temple's outer walls. Once the Romans were in position, the rebels set fire to the colonnade, trapping many Roman soldiers in the flames. This gave the defenders a big boost in confidence and frustrated Titus even more. In the next big fight, Titus ordered his soldiers to destroy the northern colonnade to create more space for his troops. The rebels were now trapped inside the inner temple. Even though things looked bad for them, they kept fighting. They launched a surprise attack, but the Romans stood their ground, and both sides suffered heavy losses. Desperate, the rebels attacked one more time. The Romans fought back hard, pinning the defenders against the temple walls. In the chaos, some Roman soldiers acting without orders started a fire in the temple. The flames spread quickly, and the Romans finally gained control. They looted the temple's treasures, and most of the remaining rebels were killed. With the temple destroyed, the Romans pushed forward. The remaining rebels, led by Simon and John, tried to talk to Titus to make a deal, but Titus refused. He ordered parts of the city to be burned, and pushed the Jewish fighters back to the upper city and Herod's palace. The rebels were now weak and surrounded, and the Romans crushed the last of the resistance. Jerusalem had fallen. After the city's fall, the Romans showed no mercy. Thousands of Jewish men were forced into hard labor or sent to fight as gladiators. Women and children were sold into slavery. Simon bar Gioras and John of Gischalla were captured. Simon was executed in public, while John was sentenced to life in prison. Even though Jerusalem had fallen, the First Jewish-Roman War wasn't over yet. The fighting would continue for 3 more years, including the tragic siege at Masada. In the end, Rome claimed victory, and Vespasian and Titus secured their power as rulers of the Flavian dynasty.